Welcome to Dan's On Site with Dan Dutton and Dan Goley, a podcast and YouTube show dedicated to all things real estate, delivering market information, interviews from all perspectives, and tips for everyone involved in or interested in real estate. We'd love to hear from you. Dan's at dansonsite.com. Hey, welcome to Dan's On Site. So it's been a couple months since we last seen you. We ended season 1. We're going to call this season 2, coming fresh to you after the new year, although as we record, it's right before Christmas. And so, Dan, you starting Christmas shopping today?
I'm 60% complete.
Okay. So,
which is actually a record. I'm usually the night before, 23rd, 24th.
So hopefully by the time this comes out in January, you'll
I'll
be done.
Completely done with the list.
That's good. That's good.
Eric, have you started?
I think I'm done, man. I e-commerce, it's really helped me out in regard to my Christmas.
Well, we're kind of brick and mortar guys.
Talk about brick and mortar around here, but
Right.
Sorry,
anyway. Middle class.
So as always, you can find us at dansonsite.com, Facebook, Dan's On Site. Don't forget about the real estate group on Facebook, Real Estate On Site. And so as we get started here today, we're joined by our colleague Eric. Eric's been you've been a broker for a while, but I don't know, 5-10 years ago, whenever you got started in self-storage, and that's what we're talking about today. Tell us, how did you get started in storage?
So I'm a broker. I've been an agent, real estate agent since 2005, I guess. But my family's been in the real estate business since the 90s. We own the family farm. Bought that in the 80s on land contract from my grandmother. That was my dad. And basically, my dad paid down the family farm. Late 90s, we bought an office building in Omaha. And then a couple years later, we bought the neighboring property, which was a storage property. And so that's how I got into the storage business. Since then, we've acquired 2 more properties. I just did a conversion. So it happened organically. But it's an interesting industry. After seeing the returns on the property we bought, I think we bought it in 2002, we're like, well, we should probably do more of this. And so that's how I got into storage.
So people store, is there a historical story with storage? Is it, obviously people have had junk or stuff to put places
right
for a long period of time. Is there any kind of a history or a story or creation of self-storage?
So I would say that storage experts would say that we're on the 5th generation of storage type of building. And I think what most people think about when they think storage is they think the single story structural steel buildings with the roll-up doors and then rows and rows of those.
A bunch of garages.
Right, a bunch of garages connected, and that's what a lot of people think about storage. And those are probably like the 3rd generation of storage type buildings. Then you start to see those pop up in the 80s. And I think, historically we've always thought that storage people were kind of pack rats, that segment of society. But it turns out that people have a lot of stuff, and especially anymore what we talked about with e-commerce, and everybody has stuff. And so, historically I would say that I always thought it was the pack rat type, but it's not. It's basically everyone. And the denser the marketplace, the more storage you need, because people are trending towards smaller living spaces in urban settings. Opposite for suburban settings, obviously. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, it kind of does. I think it's evolved too. You're saying 5th generation. So current generation would be the 5th, which is climate controlled, multi-story.
That's what I was going to ask. A lot more. It seems like there's a lot more indoor storage now than ever before.
And so traditionally, storage was on kind of secondary land, and it'd be the parcel behind the retail building, or
zoning has to be a certain level of industrial too.
Typically. What you're seeing now with the 5th generation style buildings is they look more like office buildings, and storage developers are actually buying primary land. So they're buying land on the main thoroughfares and they're going vertical. So you're seeing 4 or 5 story structures that look almost like office buildings. And so that would be what we consider the 5th generation.
We've talked about it before as we look at some new uses for or for retail property, old Kmart's, old Sears, old whatever, storage seems to be a popular use for some of those old buildings.
Right. And that, that segues the old big box retail centers really segues nicely into storage. They can convert those. Sometimes they're large footprints, like 100,000 plus square feet. They usually have, pretty good visibility. You do see some pushback from cities and municipalities in regard to zoning regs and building standards. And so that's always what's kind of, in my opinion, driven the development, was that the cities didn't like them unless you really made them look like an office building. And at that point, if you're spending, let's say you're spending $100 a foot, well, maybe you're not going to build storage now. Maybe you're going to build a retail building or an office building. But anymore, I think there's so much access to capital, and you're seeing so much money in the system that now you're seeing developers, they're not afraid, storage developers, they're not afraid of those new building design standards.
So how do banks look at that then? I mean, you mentioned, is it from, like you could, like retail or office, you have, 5, 10, 15, 20-year leases, you can put a cap rate on it, or however you break all those down. How does a bank look at?
Well, lenders were traditionally very leery of storage.
30% down, 40% down?
But they're not leery anymore. I would say in the last 5 years, even the small community banks that have a commercial portfolio, they're not scared of storage anymore either. It used to be they were worried about the replacement costs, because if it's just it used to cost $25 to build that structural steel, the garage in a row. That was $25 a foot. And so that's hard to lend on something like that when your replacement cost is so low. But lenders are sophisticated enough now to understand that storage, traditionally, occupancy wise has been good, and their safety in numbers. So in regard to your tenant base. So I think that over the last 5 years, lenders have, become accustomed to what underwriting a storage.
Well, we were talking before we came in here about just how much institutional money is in storage nowadays.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that gives banks some confidence moving forward too. If the big guys from New York or LA or wherever are pouring money into storage, then I'm guessing everybody wants to be in storage.
Yeah. That's been another thing too, is the consolidation of even small tertiary markets with the REITs and large private equity firms buying up small mom and pops. So in the Omaha market, you used to have, I would say, over 50%, I would say 10 years ago, over 50% were just mom and pops, when I mean mom and pop, that would be small owners like me, where it's just 1 or 2 or 3 properties. But now you're seeing private equity and REITs come in and buy these mom and pops, consolidate these industries in these sub-markets, and you're seeing that even today in Omaha.
So what are, when you're out, maybe you're looking at an existing location, maybe you're looking at a site for new construction. What's your site selection criteria? What's the criteria you want to meet to say, hey, let's take an existing property first and talk about not only maybe the quick financials of that property, but the demographics surrounding that property. And then on a new site, what are kind of the site criteria you look for on something new?
My criteria is similar, I guess, in scope to private equity or the large REITs, but I'm fairly picky and my return expectations are higher than most. But traditionally, what I would do if I'm looking at a market is I would just look at how much, what they rent for. So the first thing I would do is I'd pick up the phone and I'd call whatever, the storage company, if they're a reputable brand, if they have a couple stores, more than one store, and ask them, hey, what's a 10 by 20 rent for? Because typically that's what's going to drive. So if they're below what I would consider a reasonable amount to build or convert, because it's just a function of between, whatever that gap is between what it costs to develop and then what it rents for. And if they don't have enough rent, that means the demand's not high enough and the market's not mature enough for me to enter that market. The second thing is you would look for square footage per person. That's a ratio everybody uses. Typically, the number is 8. So 8 square feet per person is the kind of what they would consider in the industry.
That's how much self-storage I personally need.
Yeah, well, that would be...
You have blown way past.
Yeah, so 8 square feet per person, that's a good way to quantify that ratio. So if you're below that, well, that would mean that and then if your rent numbers are high enough, that would mean that you need to build. But if you're above that, then, you have to take that into consideration. So, and that does move around. So if you're in a very dense market, let's say, I don't know, DC, right, where they have really strict code on how far you can build and how high up you can build, that number might be, if, you might be lower than that. But if you're in a higher market, like a more rural market, you might be 12 or 14 square feet per person. So
what would be I call it a driving factor, but is it neighborhoods that, a lot of these new neighborhoods, they're not big fans of outdoor sheds, and some of them, the cost of building a new house is more expensive. Is that kind of one of the driving forces of people moving into storage, or is it they just want to, it's an inexpensive way to have another garage?
For developers to get into it? Or
developers, or, how would you?
Well, I think what drew developers to this product type was returns. Returns are historically have been very high compared to other asset classes. So, and maybe, I don't know why private equity, and you see a lot of family office getting involved with private equity. I don't know, maybe it just wasn't a sexy asset class. I don't know, but returns have historically been much higher than you would expect out of an office building or something. Because, I mean, let's say you're building, you can expect to get on an annual basis $12 per square foot for just a little space, right? And so imagine paying $40 to build that, and then having to pay $130 to build that when you're selling, like say if you're leasing to retail. And so the return spreads were, historically very high, and I think that's kind of why.
Well, it's minimal electrical. There's no plumbing.
Yeah, you're running a business within a business, and so I'm not that sophisticated of an operator, but you have right. You have a on-site property manager.
Don't sell yourself short.
You have to consider that you're taking,
on the show, right?
You're collecting. Right, exactly.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
You have to consider that. So I have 1,000 doors. That's not a very big operator, but you have 1,000 transactions every month you have to do, and sometimes they're like $50 transactions, and then you have to work with your property managers. Okay, you have to call that person to get that $50.
Is there someone on site on every single, or where's the break off? You have 100 units. You need someone on site.
I mean, around here, you're kind of I'm looking for 50,000 feet minimum to leasable space. That way I can hire someone, or at least have a satellite manager. Or if you have two locations that are close, you can do a lot of. I do have a satellite manager at one location, so they manages two locations. And with technology, you can do it. But people still like to buy from people, and so if you can have somebody on site, that's very helpful. I would say, probably about 60% of our transactions now are mobile, and so you can secure that. Really? But there's older generations that want to come in and talk to.
How many defaults do you have a month on percentage-wise?
Usually we're running about, I'd say 2 to 3%.
Well, that's not bad.
And that's not really a default.
Can you just kick them out like in 30 days you're done? Is that how the contract reads?
So
like
Nebraska for the longest time didn't
watches?
have lien laws.
Oh,
They didn't really have any standards for the storage industry. And one thing that one of the large operators, national operators, came in and they're involved in the market now, Storage Mart, and they did a really good job of pushing the unicameral to actually come up with some lien laws. So we actually have a process now that you go through. We don't have on-site auctions. They're online. So you open the door, you take a photo. My goal isn't to do storage wars. My goal is to have that unit back to lease.
Too bad.
So it's super boring.
I was kind of hoping
that.
Yeah.
We could film a Dan's on-site storage wars episode. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Absolutely.
We have to
we can
really
totally
not see
pretend.
what's inside before.
The most exciting thing I've had was a Harley Davidson, and honestly, I wish I would have never seen that Harley Davidson. The guy didn't have the title. He didn't want the bike. The title was hawked by some pawn shop in Georgia.
Oh, wow.
It was a nightmare.
So how do you get rid of that?
Partners bid auction about this.
Partners bid auction.
Okay. So the guy, the story is, we contacted, obviously the guy that had the bike. Hey man, you're in default. Well, he didn't have the money.
Pay
Okay.
us $50, you can have your bike.
Well,
back.
he was in default by like, it was $700. And, so that's the process because that's how much it adds up. That's the process you go through. And he didn't have the money. He didn't want the bike back. That was it. And he didn't have the title for it. He hawked the title in Georgia. And so we called the Georgia guy and said, hey man, you've got this bike. We don't have the title. We've heard you have the title. We'll ship this bike to you. We just need the $700. And he said, no, I want you to pay for the title, the $6,000. And I said, no, that's not going to happen. And I'm not going to give you $6,000 for a bike I don't want. And so what we ended up doing was we ran through the auction process and we sold it. And that guy didn't get his money, the guy with the title. And someone got a good deal on a Harley Davidson. They had to go through the process of getting a new title, which we worked through.
Do you salvage title that? Is that the
No,
term,
they got a clean title.
Really?
Yep. And so we went through that process. It was a real pain. And
Because you actually foreclosed on the bike, I guess. And
basically, yeah, we got our attorney involved. I mean, it was not a cheap thing. Like I said, I wish I would have never seen that bike. But yeah, so you run into stuff like that. Typically, it's just junk. We had one guy buy a box. It was because you're not supposed to look at the units, and so he bought a unit, and it was all new, like appliance boxes and television boxes, like flat screens. So the thing looked packed full of like awesome brand new electronics. Well, it turns out the guy that leased the unit for only a month and went in default. The state law says that you have to give them the balance, right? So say if Joe Schmo rents a unit and that unit auctions for $1,000, if he only owed us $500, we're supposed to send him the money, the balance. And so this guy, what he did was he scammed us and he scammed the poor guy that bought the auction.
Genius.
He filled it full of empty boxes. And so the dude bought it, the auction guy bought it at auction, went through the process. And
Coming soon to an auction near you.
It was like, he paid like $1,000. And it turns out these boxes were all empty. And so we felt bad for the guy. We just gave him his money back. I don't care. That dude's not getting his money.
So anyway, if you have any washer and dryer boxes, TV boxes,
Right. All kinds of ways.
Let's
for
just call them
scumbags.
Mart.
Yeah, Mart, yeah.
Before they recycle,
Yeah,
we'll
we
go
just-
right down to
And
them.
I'm sure some of the
We'll
larger
cut 'em in on the
operators
deal.
have way more cool stories than I have. I'm pretty boring. But like I said, I just want
No
the-
animals,
want the-
bodies.
Yeah, we don't
none
do
of that.
food, don't do animals. If it's a family heirloom, we say do not put it in storage.
If goalie gets kicked out of his house, can he live in one for a while?
We have that too. I'm not going to get into those
I
stories.
don't need much plumbing or
Yeah.
electrical.
Yeah, that happens, man.
Man, we
People
have
live in them.
gone way off track.
Yeah.
Although I do want to explore this idea of empty appliance boxes, but we'll talk about that later. So, getting back to track here. So I live all the way out in the suburbs, and in new constructionville, I am amazed by just how many new storage complexes pop up all the time out there. And I'm amazed because people, generally live in larger houses than they did 50 or 75 years ago. A lot of times smaller families than they did 50 or 75 years ago. And then to think, you were talking about density earlier, there's obviously going to be less density there than there is in early town. So, is that the future of self-storage, is just going out to the suburbs and building up more complexes? Or what do you think the future is?
I would say it's just going to follow housing growth. I mean, everything kind of stems from housing. All the other asset classes do. So as long as we continue to build housing, there will always be a need, and our population increases, there will always be a need for more storage.
Especially apartments.
Yeah. I mean, I like density. I like some things that I like as a developer. I like, infill. So I like to go into the middle of town and find a spot. I think that makes a little higher barrier to entry. Suburban, a lot of people have success out there, but they have to be really patient. So if you're building on the fringe, you just have to have patient money.
So Eric, you are in a little bit of everything, and we'd hate to bring you on and not at least give you a chance to kind of talk about what else you're in. I know you're recently, maybe not that recently, but not that long ago, got into the Salon Suites business. If you would, give everybody just a quick overview of what the Salon Suite business is and how it's going for you.
So I own a retail building that has a second floor that was about 12,000 feet. It was kind of a problem child of the assets that we own, and I couldn't find somebody to lease it, and I was having to give it away. And I did a couple lease deals up there, but somebody approached me and wanted to do a Salon Suites, and it was expensive. There was a lot of build out involved. And I talked to a few
Turned out
people.
great. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I had a really good team. I didn't really do any of it. I just hired really good people to help me. But so we had this space within the portfolio, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I had a couple people talked about Salon Suites, and so I designed it. I ran the pro forma, and I do lean towards a couple different asset classes, but really for me, like I said when we first talked this morning, the real estate is just a vessel to create wealth. And so if I see big returns and low risk, I'm gonna do that. And so we built called Spectrum Studios, and there's 20 studios that we lease out to individual salon tenants, and they all run their own businesses. I was really concerned about, I'm not really that guy that goes to the salon and gets his hair did,
You're not?
No, I'm not. I'm just an average Joe. So, yeah, with a great beard.
Someone has to trim it.
Right. And so, I was kind of concerned about that, but there's a stigma. I think there's a stigma surrounding stylists, and everybody's been super professional, and they're great. And, it's an interesting industry, but really at the end of the day, I'm just leasing studios, real estate, to a tenant, and that tenant just happens to pay weekly, and they do hair. So.
Well, it's kind of a community. If you haven't seen it, it's great. It's on, about 147th-ish in Maple.
Yeah, we're 100% full, and that'd be another thing I'll be looking to do if I can find a building that has a hole in it and put another Spectrum in there, because we had some really good success there. So, like I said, I'm just kind of chasing the return, and this happened, and it seems like I'd like to have more scale. That's another thing I'm always looking for is scale, so I can hire good people, because I have a very limited talent set. And I want to hire people that are really good at what they do. And so if I can get scale, that would help me do that. So that's kind of what I'm searching for now.
Hey, real quick, I wanted to backtrack real quick. COVID, positive on storage, but negative on storage, neutral on storage?
We didn't really see a change in any of our occupancy numbers that I can equate to COVID. We didn't see an uptick in overlocks, which is someone that's in default. That's what we call that. So I don't know. I can't answer that.
Lock on top of lock.
Overlock, yeah. I don't think I'd be a good sounding board for that, but we haven't seen a change. I don't think they've stopped talking about new developments. I think some things that are what I would call maybe hurdles or roadblocks for the self-storage industry is a lot of it has to do with one, either construction costs, because that's never going down. And then the second part is really the cities. Some larger markets have actually stopped, even if you have a nice looking, office building style, vertical 5th generation storage facility, they've actually stopped permitting storage. Some larger markets have. And so that's the one thing I would see as, kind of the hurdles for self-storage. But, it's just, everything is derived from housing, from people. And if people keep coming and they keep building houses or apartments, storage is going to be there. And the developers will find a way to put storage there.
Deanne, any final questions, parting shots before we take off?
I think it's great. I think, thanks for coming on, Eric. It's certainly one aspect of, I'd call it out of all the classes, that's really kind of just taken off the last 5 years. You've had your multifamily, which everyone says that bubble's going to pop, but storage has kind of secretly run that same parallel path. So,
yeah,
thanks for coming on, I hope.
Yeah, happy to. You're welcome.
Eric, if you don't mind, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how would they go about doing that?
So if you're looking for storage, my brand is called Storage Cave, and we have 3 locations, 2 in Omaha, 1 in Papillion. Also, my other business is Spectrum Studios, or you can send me an email. I'm on the Omni website. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Renner at omnipartners.com.
There you go.
So as we get into 2021, Dan and I will be back with lots of episodes, probably hopefully talking about coming out of COVID and how that's affecting the real estate market. We're trying to bring you guys maybe a little bit different than just the normal Aldi's opening up at 192nd and Center or stuff like that. A little bit different take, give you some inside information on stuff you maybe don't hear about all the time. So if you got something that you would love to see us talk about, please reach out. Dan's at dansonsite.com. Dan, anything to add?
Nope, that's it. Thank you very much for listening to us in 2020, and we look forward to an even better 2021.
As always, Dan Goley, I'm Dan Dutton. Thank you guys very much. Catch
Thank
us.
you, Eric.
Welcome. Merry Christmas.
dansonsite.com. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. Thanks again for joining us. Find us on Facebook, at YouTube, Dan's On Site. All your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. We would love it if you hit the subscribe button and also leave us a review. Reach us at dansonsite.com.